Listen up.
Welcome to the PowerShell Podcast, the podcast for PowerShell and the PowerShell community. And now, here's your host, Andrew Plaw.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the PowerShell Podcast. Every single Monday, we're dropping new episodes. We're getting close to episode 200. I think this is like 196. I don't know. It is Cybersecurity Month, so we have a very special guest today. Longtime friend of the podcast. I think we first talked to him in 2022. So it's been a few years since that initial meeting. We had one other chat, but now he was returning to join us. We've talked about a lot of things with him. We've gone from repositories to now we're going to be focused on security and kicking off Cybersecurity Month with none other than Adil Leghari, longtime friend, crushing it on the Cortex Cloud at Palo Alto. How you doing, man?
Awesome. Yeah, really good, man. Andrew, so good to talk to you again, old friend, and spend some time. Yeah, I'm now, my official title is domain consultant at Palo Alto Networks, working on the Cortex platform. Yeah, focused on cloud cybersecurity mainly.
It's fun. When we first talked to you, you had 15 years of experience was in your little bio, and now you're over 20. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah. So what you're saying is I'm old. Yeah. It's very true. Experience, seasoned. Yeah, seasoned. Salt and pepper. I like to think there's a lot of gray hairs in here from cybersecurity alone, I assure you. It's crazy. Yeah, very much a different evolution. So from the PowerShell world, of course, we met back in PowerShell Summit back in the day, and it was more so just, sysadmin stuff, automation, PowerShell modules, building stuff, and then moving over to, package management, artifact management at Chocolatey and Cloudsmith, and then over to identity at Okta, and sort of now at cybersecurity at Palo Alto. So quite the journey.
Heck yes. And I'm glad that we get to kind of experience it with you now. You ran it up in the PowerShell space, and now we get to kind of tag along as you kind of forge new paths and security in the cloud. And a lot of stuff we can talk about there, but I want to start off with a quick little win that you have recently relaunched. I almost said PowerShell. That was something we did last year. This is Cyberdle, cybersecurity focused Wordle, which is actually sick. Like, it's very cool, the concept of it. But if you look at it, it's actually beautiful. Like, it looks very nice. So kudos to you for that. But can you tell us about what is this thing? What inspired it?
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind words. Well, it was sort of just my foray into, this is a lot of my personal stuff that I do, obviously on my home lab apart from work things. But yeah, I kind of see the cybersecurity space like in the past year or so in earnest that I've been in it. And sort of in a couple of the 3 or 4 years before that in identity that I was sort of cybersecurity adjacent, I see a lot of acronyms getting thrown around. And everybody smiles and nods in the meetings and says, yeah, sure. We know exactly what CSP and CNAP is. That's great, this and that. And C-level folks will never, admit to not knowing some of these things, and that's fine. But I think a lot of it just kind of feels a little bit like gatekeeping almost, like folks don't want to acknowledge that they don't know it, and then it just goes unsaid. And there's a lot of this like, hey, let's make learning some of this a little bit easier, hopefully, right? And so it just evolved out of that, and kind of I've been interested in game logic and game mechanics for a long time, but just sort of being like something super simple, like a puzzle, right? And I loved Wordle when we started playing it. So, obviously, full credit to that team and those folks for building that out. Individual person, I think it was, but yeah, like from that sort of idea, it's sort of like over the weekend, it was literally like a shower thought. I was like, well, we have a lot of these acronyms. I've thought about a flashcard app before, but flashcards are just not as fun or engaging as I'd like them to be. And then I'm like, what if we could combine those concepts? So give you a definition of an acronym, and then let you play the world game to try and find the words or find the individual letters and sort of build it out. Yeah, so that's organically where Cyberdle came from, and sort of like it just built out of that. And people have been checking it out, and it's super cool. So yeah, free and open source. It's on GitHub. So yeah, anybody can build it. And the cool thing was, my whole thing about it, like intentionally, was very much, I think it's really easy in the age of AI to build things like just YOLO it, right? And I think I wanted to be intentional in terms of I wanted something where, it's just a couple of files, an index.html and then an acronym file. So you can essentially run this locally. You don't have to, you can just pull down the repo. You don't actually have to use the web app at all. So I know a lot of people in, in SOCs and other places and in work environments where they're like, hey, I don't have, I have something air gapped, or I don't really want this to run this on my work machine, or I want it to be able to run wherever. So it's literally just an HTML site with some styling and an acronym file. So trying to be as simple as possible.
And we'll have a link to it in the show notes. But for everyone out there who's just listening, where can we access this?
Right. Yeah. It's on GitHub, and it's also available in cyberdle.adilio.ca. That's my personal domain. So I just threw it on there. So it'll be in the show notes, of course, but it's available to play online just for free. And my idea around it, and something I haven't even told you yet, but it's something that I've been working on the last couple of days, is I want to make it so that, I like the engine, so sort of game engine of it, where it's really simple. But this is just acronyms for cybersecurity. I have a vision of a version of this called Quizzle, which is essentially something where you can take any set of words and definitions or acronyms, you point it to an API, and you give it your own style sheet, and it just will render something for you personally, right? Like if you're in a different space, right? Yeah, like the studying for your CISSP, or doing something in specifically in package management or PDQ on the automation side, in building something, you could just create your own version of it and spin it up.
Or you're a teacher trying to teach simple words to like a young class. I don't know, man. We could see
exactly. Yeah,
it's a great concept. Like if you can just reapply that in other places, it makes sense. And I think that speaks to maybe a thing or two you've learned earlier in your career about the proper way of designing things and kind of creating things in a reusable way. When you can do that, you can save yourself a lot of hassle. And it sounds like you're going to be able to take what started as one idea, reuse some of the logic, and all of a sudden like exponentially increase your output just from taking a thoughtful design approach.
Right, exactly. And I think I bring a lot of the design stuff into it, but I think I have to give credit where it's due. I think all of us that started in PowerShell back in the day, Andrew, and especially you, I think, we've always been kind of focused on being force multipliers, right? What can we do to add value to the community as a whole? And I think a big part of it is, hey, it's great if you built your little thing and it works and it does your purpose, but what about if you could make it extensible and make it usable by everybody? And, actually trying to help folks a little bit.
Absolutely. And it just feels better. I prefer having a career where that is like core to it. No matter what job I'm doing, I'm going to find my ways to get that good feeling of like super efficiency. Kind of like I'm playing a wild game or something.
Exactly. No, I think that's a great point, because I think it applies in your work career too. Like for me, especially, I mean, I guess we've talked before about career progression and stuff like that. And I think the one that stayed with me always is, can you take your ideas that you have or your individual thing that you're doing? Let's say I'm building a demo for a customer, or I'm customizing a thing, or I'm writing a script, or I'm generating some vulnerable misconfigurations or VMs. Can I make that something that's copy pastable or, reusable for everybody? I always think about like, what can I do to add value to the team, more so than just like a single use thing, right? I can take my single use thing and then I just start thinking, okay, how can I make this generic, adaptable, and like repurposable for everybody? It's not a word, but yes.
A very simple example of that sort of efficiency thing. And I mean, this is something that anybody can do. I think it helps if you even have like some seniority in your team, or maybe you've been there for a while and have some trust. But we're talking about acronyms. If you're in a meeting and there's an acronym, maybe you know it, but it's a little bit more obscure, or maybe you don't know it. If you ask that in the chat, right, you're not only answering it for you, but all of a sudden you're answering it for all these other people that are too shy, and you're showing them that it is okay to ask questions when you don't know, and you remove the expectation of everyone needing to know everything, which can be very challenging for some people.
Right. You become the anti-gatekeeper, which is great. I think that even if the next level hack to that, and Andrew, you're probably good at this already, is like when you're presenting, just spell it out as you say it, right? Like CNAP, or Cloud Native Application Protection Platform, right? Or CSPM, or Cloud Security Posture Management. Just effortlessly weave it into your talk track, or just get used to the fact that anytime I say an acronym, I'm going to define it the first time at least. Really, really ups your game in terms of storytelling and presenting.
Yeah. And I mean, that's how it should be. Like if you're ever writing anything, well, I don't know anything, but like whenever I've written blogs for official sources, it's been like anytime you refer to something, the first time you need to define the acronym. And I think it definitely should apply to kind of anything. Otherwise, you just assume a certain level, which may be fine in some contexts, but you're really narrowing who's going to be receptive to your messaging. But we like efficiency. So you're just like, we don't need to narrow, we'll make it bigger. More people can connect with it. And we just put forth the same effort and just get better results. So I could talk about that all day, but with you, there's a lot of topics I want to talk about because you are interested in some things that I've been dabbling with lately. We want to talk about AI and a lot of use cases, but one I'm very curious to touch point with you in a little bit is AI for personal use. I've warned people on the podcast that I vibe coded myself into a corner recently. I was doing some stuff. So I'm trying to train my own local AI. So I have a ton of PDFs and I was doing some stuff and I needed to like rename because some had like characters that weren't valid. And I quickly just asked AI, hey, I need to remove these characters. And I just took the script, the regex, and I just ran it. And it bonked everything. I didn't check because it's not work and it's just file name. So I was a little bit different with how I approached it, but I renamed all my files. So it would have been like the PowerShell podcast. And it was like PowerShell Oddcast. So I just totally mocked it up. But you talked about vibe coding this. So this is where I really want to get to, because I had this realization. I've used AI to code things, and the most success I have is GitHub Copilot small chunks. If I give too many big chunks, I notice that it just keeps expanding. It'll be like 1,000+ lines when it probably could be like 250 if I would have written it. What is your approach to like coding with AI, vibe coding, so to speak?
Right. That's a great question. And believe me, I've painted myself in the same corners many times. I think I've lost data. I've lost other things, but it was sort of pet hobby project, right? Personal stuff. I think over the past probably year or two that I've been sort of playing with it and dabbling in my own time. I have to say that with AI, I do feel like it's a really good instruction follower. So I think over time, I've just improved the instructions that I give it, or the quality of the instructions that I give it. So a lot of times now what I'm trying to do more and more of is be really intentional about what I'm putting into it, what the inputs are. So what I mean is with a model, like I think model and training data and retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, is really useful as a stepping stone. But I mean, it serves certain purposes, right? If you have an individual set of data, like this is purely, we're talking home labbing and for personal use. What I find is the most accessible way to sort of have your own little knowledge base that you're building off of and have to AI hallucinate a lot less is, using something like Notebook LM from, Google Gemini. So Notebook LM is very much will train on the data set that you give it and not anything else. So if you have enough amount of curated PDFs and documents and markdown and text, you can throw that all in there, including YouTube video links, etc. And Notebook LM will keep the context to what you give it, so it won't hallucinate off of that. So I find that's really useful for just personal stuff. Of course, if you get into real RAG and like tools like N8N and stuff like that, then you're looking at additional, like, what models are you using? What type of data are you training it on? What are you training it to do? Are you training it to answer questions from docs? Or are you training it on a specific language or framework? Or is your goal sort of to vibe code, right? If your goal is more on the vibe coding side, let's say vibe-ish coding, I find it's really helpful to get more structured early on. So one of the tools that actually, friend of the podcast and a friend of both of us from PowerShell back in the day, Nate Farrell, who was at AWS for a long time, Nate has recommended a thing to me which was very useful, which is GitHub Spec Kit. And essentially all of these different tools, what they're trying to do is they're trying to give you, help you build something where it's like, define your spec ahead of time. Just like actually when you're building something out and you have sort of like a PRD or product requirements doc or anything like that, or planning that goes into something, the better planning you do ahead of time, the better outputs you're going to get. So GitHub Spec Kit is a cool project because I find that it will go and do that planning for you in a sense. You actually can give GitHub Spec Kit just like a paragraph or a few sentences of what you want to do and some general guidelines, and it will go and build a spec for you and actually elaborate on that spec, improve on it, iterate on it, and then help you build the app. So I think there's a lot of tools coming out, but that's just one that I want to mention. I will say that like the AI space is ever changing and ever evolving. And like even this week, I think OpenAI had announced more stuff with their agent kit stuff and everything. So I think as soon as I understand a thing or a certain technology in AI, I find like it's out of date, that knowledge, in like about a week or two with the rate we're going.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a few interesting perspectives we can talk about when it comes to AI. And I think that it's worth noting there is an incredible amount of money behind this. So it's going to be unavoidable that something's going to come from it. There's going to be things kind of forever changing because there's just such a impetus behind it. But for people who are at jobs, at companies, what should companies be thinking about with all of this stuff in AI and their data?
Yeah, great question. So I think from that perspective, if we shift out from home lab world over into organizations and enterprises, that's sort of my bread and butter, right? That's what we work with organizations on. So at Cortex Cloud and the Cortex platform of Palo Alto Networks, what I work on specifically is, with AI is the security posture of AI. So it's something called AI SPM, AI Security Posture Management. And we're essentially looking at AI like data at that point. We're looking at the data, so the model data, the training data, the inference data, all those pieces. We're identifying where it has, sensitive information, like sensitive to the organization, credit card numbers, other details. If that data contains anything sensitive there, even health data, even personally identifiable information, stuff like that. We want to be able to qualify that. We want to be able to inventory that and to show it. And then at that point, we want to surface anything, right? Surface any issues to the organization, like, hey, this model or training data has, misconfiguration, let's say. It's like any other database sitting there. If it's got, over permissive identities attached to it, roles, et cetera, then you suddenly have issues there, right? You're like, hey, this is like data that's available, in a public data set, essentially. So those are the pieces that I do from an AI security posture perspective. But then organizations, a lot, what I see is, so Palo has many different tools and solutions in the space. So I'm not going to get into all of them because I also don't want to just shill my stuff. I think cybersecurity has plenty of tools, and our colleagues in the space, plenty of companies help as well. So I think organizations, though, very much what they're worried about is, like, let's say you have, company A. And so company A has sort of its sanctioned models, its sanctioned co-pilots and other things that are built into the tooling. And they're trained on the data, and they're not, that data is not shared with any other model, or, the platform is not using that data to train anything. So that's sort of the blessed model, right? Or the blessed usage or feature. But then individuals, right? Organizations, a lot of folks say, hey, we're abiding by the company terms, but then they got ChatGPT open here, right? In another window. So there's a lot of ways to be able to secure, like, the runtime stuff, to be able to, secure AI in flight. So generative AI usage just in general, right? On that side, we have, like, there are tools where you can we have a browser called Prisma Browser, which is very much like looking at real time, what are folks typing into prompts and what sites are they visiting. Obviously, we can shut down the site, but maybe it's more useful to be like, hey, we allow this certain access to ChatGPT, let's say, but if you're going to copy some data out of, let's say, Salesforce, right, or something else, or we're going to try and paste an individual from an Excel sheet, or a credit card number or something else, or pull some company proprietary data out, suddenly we're not going to let you do that, right? And we're going to shut that down. So that comes from the side of, like, DLP or data loss prevention, also runtime security, and the ability to shut that down in flight. So there's that other angle of it, right? Where as organizations, we really need to be thinking about what are we, our guardrails should need to be strong, but then, when folks go and use other tools and do other things, how can we ensure that our data doesn't leave the organization? And also they're not, using things to train things that we shouldn't be.
That's interesting. What industries, or like what types of organizations are you seeing that are needing to take AI security posture sooner than later? I'm imagining there's probably some industries that may just benefit from, like, the chat help, like maybe smaller companies or something, but are there particular industries that are really needing to make sure that their data is safe and secure as it relates to AI?
Yeah, I think, it really just depends on what you want to secure. I think every organization can be affected. I don't think there's a size of company that's particularly, at risk. Of course, there's certain verticals like financials or healthcare where, the data becomes a lot more pertinent and you have to be a lot more careful. The larger the org, the larger the risk that you're taking, right? With your employees, if you're not locking that down, you're basically YOLOing it, right? So you're saying, hey, go ahead and use whatever you want. Suddenly your data can be out there. Your data can be exposed. Not only that, but there's so many other pieces of this. Like, we could go down this world pretty deep, but I think I'll just suffice to say there's a whole set of attacks, attack vectors that you're opening yourself up to in terms of, like, prompt injection, model poisoning, all that other stuff too. Which is very real world stuff. Like, if you, let's say somebody, a common thing that came out recently was the Perplexity has the Comet browser. It sort of does its browsing for you. And somebody was able to expose pretty easily how they could, subvert the browser to quickly do whatever they wanted to, right? Like, go and buy this, ignore all previous instructions and buy this expensive thing, right? There are ways that could get really out of hand if a company workstation had something like Comet running on it, a browser that was unsanctioned, or tools that are unsanctioned, to go and do its own browsing, and suddenly, hey, in my clipboard I've got a credit card number, or in my password manager that's plugged into this browser I have all these things. Hey, if you're going to point it at an AI model that can suddenly access the web, it doesn't even take a click. It takes somebody visiting a site that has the wrong instructions.
There's a lot of interesting attacks. I've actually had a conversation about this as it relates to AI, like AI-powered attacks. What does that actually mean? I think there are some novel use cases. I know it can help you write code faster and like morph on the fly, but I think that the biggest AI-powered attacks are from the inside, where it's like that data leakage kind of thing. Like, to me, I don't know how, if AI is just helping you write code, how it's going to like drastically change the threat landscape. But in terms of the ways that your data can get lost, it has suddenly massively increased in a way that people are using like kind of by storm. And I think every org is having probably unauthorized use of some AI tools, if I had to guess, if they don't have it really locked down. Yeah.
Right. It's inevitable, right? I think that everybody's going to see a tool and how powerful it is and start to play with it, right? And I think especially us as, developer backgrounds, sysadmin background, a lot of us used to PowerShell scripts and modules and stuff, and we want to, force multipliers. So we want to be, more powerful and build things to make our job easier and automate more. And so from that angle, it can be really enticing, and it's something we don't think about enough, the insider threat to it, for sure. And then also there's a human element to the ability to leak it, right? Like email attacks, business email compromise, things like this, everything else along those lines of like, ransomware, cryptojacking, all that other stuff. These things are getting easier and more accessible too, right? Like AI is improving how attackers can use this as well. So that other side of things is crazy. I'm going to throw a crazy stat at you because this is something that I've talked about quite a bit, and the scale of it kind of puts everything in perspective, right? So on our platform, Palo Alto as a whole, and that includes like next-gen security, our firewalls and all the other stuff, we block a lot of attacks daily, right? So I'll let you guess the number of attacks that we block in a day.
I mean, I just know it's going to be, it's just based on how much people can automate. So I'm going to guess maybe, is a billion too crazy?
Billion's not too crazy. It's actually low.
Really? I was thinking like 3 to 4 billion. So
higher.
10? Mm-hmm.
So
see,
it used to be
when the numbers get that big, they're not real numbers. You know this, right?
Yeah, it starts becoming ridiculous, like silly numbers, and you don't even think about it. I will say, so it was about 10 to 11 billion last year in a day, in a 24-hour period, the number of attacks we blocked in a day. Now it's closer to 31 billion. And that's a threefold increase almost, right? The purpose of me quoting that stat is like, oh, hey, look how cool we are. No, that's not the point. The point is, look how quickly it's growing. Right, that's a threefold increase in about a year. So obviously AI is contributing to some of this. What we see is, really in terms of being able to, greatly increase that attack surface. A lot of what we're seeing is like, so our Unit 42 teams that are sort of our boots on the ground, our SEAL teams that go in and, the government calls in different places to help. Those folks are the ones that are seeing the APTs grow. So when we say APTs, we mean advanced persistent threats. So we're talking nation state actors, right? The North Koreas and Russias and folks. So those folks are also, obviously able to, increase the scale and the literal like magnitude of these attacks very quickly. So I mean, Joe Scripter in his basement is great, as a part of this, and he or she is doing a killer job at like scaling themselves and building more VMs and trying to push out more malware. But I think the real risk is those APTs, right? Those big threats, and those are the ones that are scaling, infinitely, and that's the real problem, and that's going to be a big part of it. So when you see that amount of those numbers, that scale of attack, I think a lot of what we see there is like, a lot of this is AI, right? Like, a part of this is AI, let's say at least. So on that level, how do you fight it, right? What's the most efficient way to do it? Because you can't do it with people, right? 31 billion attacks a day is not scalable by humans. So the real purpose behind it, I guess, that all of us are doing in this space is, trying to fight AI with AI, right? So what is the machine learning, the heuristics, the models that we can build on our end, the data models to improve those algorithms, to improve the ability to detect attacks like polymorphic attacks, the novel attacks you haven't seen before that are just a little bit morphed enough so that they get behind, the normal correlations. So that's the type of stuff that we work on a lot, and we try and improve, is like, fighting AI with AI, of course, but in an intentional and useful way, so that it actually like makes a difference and not just like, fills your pipeline with all of these like all this noise, right? A lot. Yeah. The biggest problem I think in our space of cybersecurity, and I could talk for this for hours, but is the fact that we have this fire hose of alerts, right? There's too many alerts, and I think our solution to this on cybersecurity as a whole in the industry and as vendors is we buy another fire hose, or we build another fire hose, right? So then we've got 20 different fire hoses to do. We buy an off-the-shelf tool and we think it's going to solve the problems. I think anything, right, from a security perspective for an organization, any tool, anything you build, you have to remember that you have to tune it and you have to improve it over time. And I think a lot of what AI is trying to do on our side, and at least on the precision AI side, is we're trying to build things where, it's going to model for you. It's going to predict things for you. It's going to recommend playbooks and automations to help you resolve those issues as well. It's not only going to surface that, alerting and remediation is great, but can you also give me prevention too, right? Can you block it before it becomes a problem?
I definitely find that the heuristic detection ability of AI is pretty good. It's pretty awesome. So it is reassuring that we are able to use, as defenders, the kind of same technology in a different way that the attackers are using. You mentioned APTs. Yeah, that's some real stuff. If you're in an org where like APT is coming across your mind ever, you should really be taking this stuff incredibly serious. And it is interesting. Like, I love the novel. I don't love the novel attacks. I find them very technically interesting. When an organization with a lot of funding behind it, or an APT rather, organization, does something with a lot of resources invested in it, it can be interesting to see technically. But gosh, I'm glad that I'm not in that defensive space right now, because imagine your mind, you're just having to learn new things and act on it kind of like all the time.
Right.
How do you balance that?
The nation state actors are the real problem with the advanced persistent threats. And I don't think the thing you have to remember is it's like there's too many oceans to boil. And I feel like you really, especially in cybersecurity, it can be such a space where it's like it is an ocean of information all the time. And so, you kind of carve out your own niches as you go. You figure out the things that are important to you, and the things that you can specialize in, and you start to focus on solving those problems. And, it's like systems, right, Andrew? You build systems around things, and, you iterate as you go, and you get a little bit better every day. And so I was thrown into a brand new platform. We were actually migrating from an old platform to the new one. We did a consolidation of Prisma Cloud, the tool I was hired for, into Cortex platform. So it became Cortex Cloud. So that was a lot of learning right off the bat. And then just like going from there, I kind of chose my little sections of things to learn. Like, first, do you want to understand data security? And then from on top of that, do you want to learn AI security? Because AI security posture, underneath it, AI is just data, right? So data and learning models around it. So I kind of choose the chunks I can learn a day at a time, and sort of be able to speak around and then just keep your eyes open, right? I think a part of being in tech now is there's always something new coming up, and you have to sort of keep abreast of a lot of those things, and you just have to keep learning.
I think you mentioned earlier about the importance of a home lab and kind of dabbling on the side. And I think that you really do need something like that to be able to maintain your skills, because you won't always be able to install all these new tools and play around with it on a work machine for good reason, right? We don't want the data to get lost in some kind of thing. So it is, for me, incredibly helpful to have a home lab. And I think you have discovered, and you're a little bit more farther along with me when it comes to this, but how important is a home lab for your growth as a professional? 20 years in, you've learned a whole bunch of different kind of aspects of IT that are sort of quite different. What's the role of like home labbing and studying for you?
Okay, so let's go back to sort of the roots, right, of how we did things as sysadmins, right, back in the day, and PowerShell lovers. So I think a lot of that is, from the PowerShell community and being enthusiasts there. So you started building your scripts, you started building advanced functions, and then you built those into modules. You wanted to make this useful for everybody. But then we go through periods in our career, we go through these sort of plateaus or lulls, right? We get sort of, disengaged with technology a little bit, or just too busy doing our day job and the certain things that come with that we sort of stop innovating, we stop thinking about things, or we stop being creative in that way. And so what I find it's great with the home lab is, you build your own home lab, you kind of give yourself like 20 different problems to solve all of a sudden, right? Because like, okay, now do I want to manage DNS? Do I want to expose this? Do I want to build a Pi-hole like to block certain ad traffic? Do I want to do this? Hey, do I want to build some containers to do what I need to do at home or what I want to play with? Do I have a home assistant? Do I have something else that I'm using? And now with AI and how that plugs into things, that suddenly becomes like, hey, imagine you had this new shiny toolbox with all these tools in it, right? Now I have to give very little prompts to something to be like, hey, help me build this thing or help me troubleshoot this thing and walk me through it. So it's like this sort of like buddy of yours that's always in your corner, that's sort of coaching you through stuff and kind of like an infinite learning, sort of platform. So I find, for me anyway, with the home lab and with AI and a lot of pieces like that, I find the best thing to do is, to treat it like a colleague or a learning model that you're kind of bouncing ideas off of constantly, right? The vibe coding stuff is great, but like also like, try and be like, hey, I'm actually engaged. I'm actually wanting to learn, because I think this extrapolates into something we were talking about before around, the certain like ethics of learning with AI, right? I think a lot of this maybe losing our desire in some ways to be critically thinking, right, about things, when I can just, hey, throw a thing at it. I don't even want to think about this email. Just throw it at AI, let it polish it up and make it sound nice. Well, hey, we do that long enough, we're going to stop having the ability to do it without it, right? So I know a lot of my fellow colleagues in the dev space are very much like, hey, AI is great, but I kind of don't want to lose touch with the code. I feel creative when I do it. It's like painting a picture in. And sometimes when I'm just letting AI do all the scaffolding and also even building out some of the functions and pieces and iterating, I feel like I'm not as in touch with the code or understanding it. So you can very much have that same conversation with AI and say, hey, explain this code to me. Explain this individual function, or explain this how these two files fit together, or where you're retrieving this data from, or how you're transacting with this API, and then have that conversation with it to try and be like, hey, I still want to be in the loop as a human, and I still want to be able to understand that. So I think home labs are a huge part of it, and I think AI is a huge part of it. But you got to do it with that same desire of like, hey, I have a problem to solve, but I want to understand this at a deep level in a way that I can apply it to my career too later.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot, because you really do have kind of like a mentor. You kind of got to keep your eye on the mentor here and there. One thing that I've also really enjoyed when it comes to like the home lab setup with AI helping here and there is using it to just give me quick little markdown documents based on everything I just set up, where I don't have to type all the boring stuff, because it's not my job. I'm not getting paid for it. I don't want to write really good docs. I just want to be able to remember this in 6 months whenever my life, gets less crazy. Because you know how that's, you could learn something for a couple months. You come back and a handful of months later, you don't know anything. So create the documentation as you go.
That is cool. That is a cool part of it. And I find if I had a suggestion for a tool there that I've started using a lot more lately, what I find actually useful sometimes when I'm just trying to, kind of put all my thoughts to paper and kind of understand and summarize and sort of make them concise, is I will take something like WhisperFlow or Super Whisper, which is a lot of the tooling that's available. There are alternatives available there too. Those are just two tools that I threw out there, which are essentially speech to text, using a little bit of AI on the back end. And so it does a really good job of sort of taking all the words. Like if I have an idea, sometimes I can't type it quick enough, or I'm rambling a little bit, but I kind of want to go stream of consciousness to bring that creative thought out. So I pull up this tool, I use my keyboard shortcut, I write the thing, or I speak the thing, and then I put it into something like AI, like a ChatGPT or something else, to say, hey, summarize this, make this succinct and concise, and then hey, throw it into my Obsidian notebook as Markdown.
That's right. What I'm using too. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
It feels fancy.
It does. It's fun.
Whisper. So you use a GUI for it? Because I've done some dabbling, and I took a ton of videos that I have saved, and I used, I believe, Whisper to get subtitles for them. At least I'm pretty sure I used Whisper, but it didn't have a GUI. So you have like a nice little GUI you can just click record on?
Right. So the underlying technology Whisper and a lot of those tools in that space are sort of open source tools and pieces of that. What folks have done is they've just built tools around it that are like more native to the OS, whichever one you're using. So I find on Mac OS, what I'm using lately on my personal machine is is Super Whisper. It's very good at quickly being able to transcribe what I'm saying and have a shortcut key that I can pull it up. Whisper Flow is another popular one. And so a lot of times when you are, let's say, vibe coding, right, in a sense, and you're pulling in quickly, like, feedback that you have for the model to say, hey, go and do this one thing now. I find I'm using a lot of CLI tooling now, like, the Claude Codes of the world or ChatGPT Codexes of the world. So those CLI tools are very useful because you can take something like Super Whisper, something else like that, Whisper Flow. There's a bunch of options, and you can just quickly bring it up, say what you want to say. It'll show you on the screen what that prompt is if you want to change anything or write a thing, and then you hit enter, and then it just throws it right into the CLI. And so you're giving the instruction as you go. It's quick iteration, quick feedback, well, which is good. Which is what AI is really good to with prototyping apps in that way.
And is it local?
It can be. You choose. Okay. Oh, you can very much choose. So the open source stuff you can run on your own, of course, that's local. You can also, in certain tools, I know the one I use, Super Whisper, actually has the ability to toggle local mode or cloud mode. If your CPU, GPU is beefy enough, you can fully run that locally, and it's actually much better, I found personally, than Siri dictation and the other tooling that's built into the OSs.
Yeah, I found that the AI dictation is definitely better than built-in. And I'm just like you. I love dictating with words. I like typing, but honestly, I find myself typing so much and so fast in a day that my hands start to hurt. So I'm kind of like, as I think about the next 20 years of my career, I'm trying to get less key types and more dictation. So I appreciate those recommendations. I'm definitely going to be checking those out.
Yeah, you should for sure check them out. And if I can make one more sort of like not technology necessarily related recommendation, it's going to sound random, but go for a walk. Right, go for a walk and use a voice dictation tool to actually just talk about things and to bring out ideas. Because when you're, in that different modality, your brain works differently, and you have the ability to think creatively in different ways. And often when you're struggling with a problem or your work, walk away from your desk. Like they say, go touch grass or whatever. But really, just go and have a walk and sort of like give your mind a little space to breathe. And then just speak to it. Just pull up one of those apps on your phone and just talk to it as you go. You're going to sound like a crazy person or look like a crazy person. But at the end of the day, if you're doing it outside away from people generally, then, you're capturing your thoughts as you go. And sort of that stream of consciousness stuff is where the real creative stuff comes from, I find.
You are just giving me the best advice I need to hear. So I'll give you a TLDR. I've been, I always have hobbies I'm into, but another one I got into recently is disc golf. And every single day before work, I wake up at like 7. I go to the park and I play. I end up walking like 2 miles. I'm the only one there. I'm absolutely going to be hitting record on this. I'm probably going to do like a voice memo and then just feed it to whatever whisper I have on my machine, and then just see if any good ideas come from it. But that's some great advice, man. That's why.
Yeah, you're kind of crushing it on not just the disc golf, but you were like a pickleball champion too, aren't you, Andrew?
Until I got injured. Yeah, I got some gold up there. What can I say? I was never pro, but I had fun. I'm big into jumping around hobbies.
Dude, that's important, right? You got to keep. I think that really keeps you healthy, right? You're exploring different things and never restricting yourself from that. I think just diving into stuff, keeps those creative juices flowing and keeps you excited about things, right?
Yeah. And I learn more about myself, especially if I go to the same hobby again. Like I can see it from a different perspective in a new place in life and learn more about how I've grown. Because if you see this your eyes every day, you don't really see the changes as drastically as when you get something to refer to. I want to say something about local AIs though, which is sick. Because there's so many ways. Like if you say you have a beefy computer at home, you can host your own AI and you can connect to it locally like a web server. Or there's other ways I'm sure that are nicer via an app where you enter in the server address and the port and whatnot. But if you connect to a VPN or something and you're on your home network or you have it somewhere else, you can make use of all your data on your machine with your compute power, which I think is really cool. And so many of the tools seem really geared towards that. If you're into tinkering and doing this home lab stuff we're talking about, it's pretty cool and not the most complicated things to set up.
Right. There's a lot of open source and community tooling that's made it a lot easier, right? Like the Olamas of the world and the other pieces, like N8N is another tool, a lot for the sort of the pipelining of different steps. I feel like these tools have made it really accessible. And the cool thing about training on your own data or building your local models is obviously you can refine them over time. But the other piece of it is you're not giving your data away to essentially other platforms. I mean, make no mistake, all of the platforms like ChatGPT and Google and all the big hits, right? They really, what they want, the hyperscalers more than anything, is your data. They want you to be able to train on what you're doing and how you're doing it. And everything that's in there, essentially, there's the concept of intellectual property becomes really gray, right? So you don't, what you own and what the AI you're giving, your data to owns is really gray area. A lot of what we learned about, how AI is trained on all those YouTube videos and all that content, right? It's crazy to see. And I think there's bigger questions we have to ask as a part of that. So really having local models is a great solution for that, to be able to be like, hey, this is my code, this is my stuff, this is my data. I'm just keeping an online thing and, learning from it, having the AI learn from it, but without sharing that data with everybody.
Yep, absolutely. I'm about to train it. I'm about to download every single audio version of this podcast, use Whisper to transcribe it, feed it to my own personal AI, and see because I don't remember everything I've ever said on the podcast, obviously. I'm very curious, like if there's certain trends of things I've said a lot, or, just that kind of thing. It's just a fun excuse to dabble with AI. Will I use it a lot? Probably not at all, but I'm going to really enjoy writing the PowerShell scripts that will read the text and whatnot and loop through and download them all and then feed them locally. It's a pretty fun thing, and it's a great excuse to learn PowerShell if you don't already.
Right, absolutely. I think there's a lot of lack of PowerShell content in the space, because I think a lot of the focus in data science in general and machine learning has been on Python. So a lot of the stuff exists for Python already. We've been object oriented adjacent to Python for many years, right, Andrew? I don't separate it anymore. Like, I think, I try to not, it's the same as we don't want to gatekeep with acronyms or anything else, right? I don't want to gatekeep languages. So I think in your career as a sysadmin, a lot of times you'll get down a path with PowerShell and what you want to do, and then something is available in Python as well. And I think you shouldn't limit yourself, and you can dabble in both. But of course, for the PowerShell community, if you can bring that data back in a way that is consumable with PowerShell, even better.
Yeah, it lowers the barrier to entry to others. But that's absolutely what I've been doing. Python scripts, and I wrap them in PowerShell logic, so I can
Nice.
For each file in get child item recurse, blah blah blah.
So you're essentially building Ansible, which is like Python and PowerShell together.
Right. Shout out Jordan Borean, local Python lover of the PowerShell community. But it's been fun because there are some really mature tools, like when it comes to OCR and stuff like that, and AI tools. There's nothing wrong with tapping out and tapping into that community and using some of their stuff. You don't even have to wrap it in PowerShell. And with AI, it really is nice. You only have to learn a few conventions in a new language, and all of a sudden you can really follow along and write code for it and kind of validate as you go, which is what I've done. But I've found if I'm not very specific, it will totally bloat the code majorly. Like just GitHub Copilot, where it tries to redo like 6 files, add a new thing, add 200 lines, remove 16 as there are issues here and there. But that's prompt engineering failed by me.
No, I think that's I think there's more than just prompt engineering at play there that's failing. I think just communities that we built online and tools, like you look at the JavaScript and TypeScript community with Node, right? So many projects that are built out, in something like, Node.js, Tailwind, Next.js, any of these tools, you'll say, hey, build me a web app to do this thing. And if you give it very little instruction, suddenly you've got 35 node modules as a dependency on this one app, right? And that's another risk that you're taking on every time you do that, right? We didn't even get into supply chain attacks and pipelines and dependencies. So there's a whole thing there where the more things that you're depending on, the more packages you're depending on out there. If any of those individual packages get subverted in any way, suddenly your app is vulnerable, right? So
yeah, it's your exposure, it's your surface area. If you have dependencies, that suddenly is yours now.
Mm-hmm.
What is the most exciting to you? I'm going to ask you the opposite of this as well, but what is the most exciting to you about AI in the IT space right now?
Right. I think that there's a lot to be excited about, right? It's not just one thing. I feel like AI has become the absolute force multiplier for everything. So there's so many things that anything that you can potentially automate or build a learning or retrieval system around, you can build into something that AI can do. And with the advent of agents now, that's the biggest piece of this, where it's like you essentially have this coworker that you're building that can do a lot of things, or, like colleague, or, like home lab buddy, where you're essentially building a person that can, or a virtual like AI agent type person. They're not humanity just yet, but it's just very much more so about like, you have this buddy that you can basically train to do a certain thing and do a certain task, and you can speak natural language to it. You can give it a problem in a natural language way, or it can look at a check in a natural language way and sort of make it accessible. I find a lot of what tripped us up before was, hey, it'd be cool if I could integrate this or that with my tool, but I don't have the understanding or the depth of understanding on that language or idiomatic or syntax or practices to be able to interface with it. But now AI has just lowered the barrier to entry for all of that. So it's really exciting what you can build with it, and I think it's going to change how we work, as sysadmins, as developers, as people in cybersecurity space, but just in general, like agents are really going to change a lot of that. And, like before we used to talk about APIs a lot, and now it's model context protocol a lot, right? You hear about MCPs again and again, which is like, how we're defining how to interact with different tools, apart from APIs. Or with APIs in some sense. But yeah, that's going to change everything. I think there's not a single part of your job, I think, that it won't touch.
Now, the opposite. What is most concerning to you, maybe as a professional, maybe as a human, when it comes to AI?
There's so much there, but I think the more, it is a loaded question, but I do feel like the more you get into it, the more you get excited about it, the more you have to be cautious of it too, right? Like from a work standpoint and from like a company standpoint, of course, there's a huge attack vector here, right? And you're increasing that attack vector if you're suddenly giving it the ability to use tools, right? Because now it can go and do things. It can build stuff. It can buy things. It can charge up costs. It can, spin up resources in the cloud that will cost you more in consumption and do all those things, right? So I think unchecked without guardrails, it can be really scary. And I think that the speed with which we're evolving in AI as a space, I don't feel like the guardrails are getting set up quickly enough. Partly because a lot of these platforms, they're not incentivized to necessarily make it that safe or secure for you, right? They say they will, they'll give it lip service, but at the end of the day, they want you to use their platform more. And at the end of the day, the more and more you use it, the more and more you're handing over your data, and from an organization perspective, the more and more risk you're taking on, right? So it's something you have to be really conscious and mindful of from an organization standpoint. Now, if we're switching into the humanity side of things, there's the whole moral ethical argument around this too, right? I'll take this back to, we're both parents, and with our kids growing up now, it's very much, you think about how education is going to change. And that, gives me pause, I would say. I wouldn't say I'm scared of it, but I think it's going to evolve how, kids learn and kids interact with things. And our brain loves these heuristics, these mental archetypes and shortcuts. And, if you give a kid AI at a very young age, unchecked, they're going to start using that shortcut as much as possible. And at what point do we lose our ability to critically think about things if we can just shortcut to AI again and again?
Yeah, I think there definitely has to be a consistent emphasis on critical thinking. Critical thinking is one of the most impactful things I learned in college. Like, to know that there are words to like critically think about something and ways to explain it was super impactful to me. I think we definitely need to, at least as parents, the little we can do on the whole world. We have a very small vector we can work with, but hopefully really emphasize those communication and critical thinking skills as we go through life. But it's untreaded territory. We just got to kind of do our best and see it as we go.
So I have to say, to leave it on a positive note, I think there's a really good way to look at it from, personally anyway, how I look at it as a parent. There's, I'm not going to, sort of gatekeep and be like the one who's like, no, my kid's not going to touch AI. Just like, they're not going to be on social media. And there's arguments for that, for sure, to hold it off till a later age. But along with that, same with before AI came along, Andrew, and when technology was in its early days, a lot of what parents said and a lot of what we heard was, just be intentional and give them the ability to think critically, or reward that or build that muscle, right? Because you don't want to spend your whole time telling them yes, no to certain things. You want them to be able to make the right decision in their own context. When their friend asks them if they want to do this certain thing, they'll be like, hey, let me think critically about this. Maybe this isn't good for me, and maybe this is not the right choice to make. So being able to make those right decisions, I think you can do the same thing with AI. And I think AI is going to be really powerful because, now we can have discussions with our kids where we say, hey, this can help you learn. This can help you elaborate on topics. This is like a personalized teacher that has attention just for you, But if we build it like you're doing, with RAG and your own models, you can build your own, personal version of AI that doesn't hand your kid the answer to the math problem, but helps them get there, right, in a way. So I think the more that we're involved and intentional in our kids' exposure to that, I think the better it is. And we could totally, think about it. You have a tutor that's personally available for your kid 24/7.
To explore all kinds of new things in a way that you don't have to be a super involved parent who hires a tutor who can afford all that. There's some really cool stuff that can happen there. Not to be too nerdy, maybe to channel my inner Mikey Lombardi, the D&D side of me, but it might be a really good opportunity for something like a board game, to teach those critical thinking skills in a fun way that's maybe a step removed from technology, and it kind of just becomes part of life. And as adults who are hopefully a little bit better at this stuff, we were in the before times when we grew up, so maybe we know a thing or two. We can hopefully impact them in some way. But I am curious to see if at some point, like board games or like in-person interactions like that doesn't have some kind of surgence, or maybe there's some alternative or Scrabble or something. But I feel like there's such a need for that type of connection and those kind of like shared spaces where people just kind of hang out and there is something to do, not just sitting there. I don't know.
Right.
That's my prediction with AI. Board games are going to take off.
Hey, tying it back to Cyberdle, right? I love it. I think that there's a way to do this, that's organic and intentional, and I think that's the right approach to it. I think like any word game, right? There were a lot of word games that started coming out, Andrew, where you were scanning like a QR code and then it brought up a mobile app on your phone, which is great. But then you don't want 4 people sitting around a table staring at their screen, right? What you want to do is maybe throw that up on a TV, but like have it be interactive and have it continue to be engaged, together as a family or a friend group. Right, instead of like just drilling you down to that. So endless possibilities with AI to do that for sure. Leave it to the Mikey Lombardis and the other folks to be able to do that in a way that's doesn't remove the humanity from it. Let's say. Yeah.
Well, gosh, Adil, we've covered some pretty impactful topics. You got me thinking over here. I'm kind of like processing a lot. You've given me some pretty direct advice. I don't know if you knew how helpful it was going to be to me, but I am very curious to see the space of like using voice to talk with things. I think there's more devices people can wear. There's Meta has some kind of device within your glasses that maybe listens to you. I don't know. But I feel like that is going to be, for me at least, the way that I think. I am excited to normalize talking to myself in public because it really does help me, stay focused on what I'm working on and not miss those fleeting ideas that, we all have great ideas. I forget most of them and I don't act on the ones that I do remember a lot of the time, but sometimes we do. And capturing those will at least make me feel a little bit more efficient.
So that's really cool you say that. I'm glad that you got some benefit out of it because it recently came to me too. I quite literally by like, let's admit our own mistakes right in public here. I think my big thing is I don't type as fast as I think a lot of times and as fast as I'd like. So because of that, I find myself doing that. And so again, general theme with this whole thing, like AI in general, I think it can be a great democratizer, right? And that's the point sort of I want to take home with it is like, if you're trying to level the playing field, democratize it for everybody, some folks don't, type very well or don't, particularly prefer typing all the time or aren't in a place where they can type. So being able to talk to it and sort of have that conversation is what a lot of these, AI chatbots are trying to build into their tool, but also we can use it ourselves to sort of refine that. And to give you an example, this is not a very real thing. I don't think we've talked about this yet, but one of the things I've been developing over the past week that will be out when this podcast is out is a website that basically came to me as an idea when I was walking, right? That I could record on my phone, and that's QR Check, right? It's simply at qrcheck.ca. You can go there. It's a free and open source tool as well. All I wanted to do was, my father-in-law actually mentioned to me that, hey, there's all these QR codes out there and I'm scanning them. And he sent me an article about, quishing. Quishing is the QR code phishing version, right? Flavor. There's all these wonderful terms we have in cybersecurity, right? And that's one of them. So that's a new one for QR codes. And so we go to a restaurant, we scan a menu, right? QR code, or we go anywhere else and there's a public one on a phone booth or something, or somewhere else. Phone booths. Are there still phone booths? But, on a pole somewhere. And you scan it and you don't even think about what you're putting into there, what link that's going to, if that's going to automatically download something or do something else. And I've often thought, like as a cybersecurity professional, but somebody who's obviously paranoid now in that space, having been there for a bit, I'm very hesitant to scan QR codes myself. And I'm like, what if there's an easy way to be able to vet this, right? And there are some tools out there already, plenty of open source tools, and other people have built stuff like paid apps. But I kind of thought, okay, I'd like to make something that's super accessible, a web app that anybody can pull up on their phone and just scan a thing really quick and be able to get some feedback on it, get a score on it based on how recently has this domain name been created, what's are there any threat intelligence models that we can pull from freely and openly, to be able to present like a score to you of how safe this is, this QR code, and follow that QR code to the end, however many hops that takes, right? So that you're not having to do that yourself on your own device, right? In an insecure manner. So it literally came to me as I was walking, and I voiced it down as a note, and then I've been building this thing for the past week. It's been fun.
I mean, I think it just goes to show that for you in this instance right here, AI has been a force multiplier. Right? You're all of a sudden, maybe you're not the best at HTML and JavaScript, but you know a thing or two about coding, and all of a sudden you spend some time with it and you are able to launch this idea that can help other people.
Right.
Bring people together ultimately, which is pretty cool.
Right. And going from ideation to prototype is huge. Like that, the ability to do that is just like, and it should get you excited again, right? If you have been, touching PowerShell here and there, but haven't been using it in earnest or building new things as much, the ability to be able to build stuff rapidly and quickly in pretty much any language, including PowerShell, should excite anybody. Well, anybody that's nerdy, I guess.
I want to talk to you more about something, but first, a quick word from our sponsors.
This is the PowerShell Podcast.
Most of you know the PowerShell Podcast is sponsored and made possible by PDQ. I've had questions from listeners asking, what's PDQ and what do you do? Well, we help IT teams automate endpoint management. PDQ Connect is our cloud-based tool for real-time software deployment, patching, scripting, remote access, and vulnerability management. It's fast, flexible, and built for people who just want things to work. If you want to see it in action, head to pdq.com/podcast and check out our interactive demo. No signups, no emails, no credit card, just a fast and easy way to explore how it works. That's pdq.com/podcast. Automated endpoint management that doesn't slow you down.
Now, back to the PowerShell Podcast.
Adil, you've had quite the career, and I think you've had success in a lot of different verticals, which is very interesting because it means you've kind of seen the same, maybe some similar patterns in multiple different places, and maybe some unique patterns that are kind of different between each little vertical. What are some of the core things that come with the Adil package that you feel like have made you successful time and time again?
Right.
Humbly so.
Well, I appreciate it. Very kind words. But I think I'm no different than everybody else in this space, right? I think the real things that I've clung on to, maybe the Adil things, if you want to call it anything, is very much like there are certain things that are core to you that you shouldn't lose, right? Authenticity is a big part of it. I think that a lot of folks that get into the space building their career and building their brand tend to, lean hard into the sort of promoting their own platform or tool or whatever it is, and sort of like, shilling their stuff in a way, but doing it in a way that feels a little inauthentic. And I think it's tough to balance that. I think as long as you're thinking about that question and thinking about being authentic and like worried about that, I feel like you're on the right track, because a certain amount of selling yourself or being out there publicly or building your career, it is going to be, a little bit of, intentional and ethical shilling, right? So I think a piece of this is, be transparent, be open, and don't be afraid of self-promotion, but do it in an authentic way that you care about. Most of the stuff that I write, if I put it up on LinkedIn or Twitter or X or Blue Sky, more so now than Twitter, of course, I'll always try and build it in a way that I'm not using AI directly for it. I want it to be in my voice and be authentic. So sort of like in terms of career advancement advice, I'd say that like the biggest thing is be authentic and be your true self, but always be not afraid to follow your own fun little hobbies and passions and home lab stuff. And even non-work related stuff like your athletic stuff that you're doing, right? That's huge, because that's just, exercising a different muscle as a part of your brain that's helping you inadvertently or indirectly with the work stuff too. So I think that's a big part of it. From a work perspective specifically, like being at my job, I think the biggest thing that I've found in my career so far in different organizations that I've worked at is, don't be afraid to say you don't know, even when you're speaking in a place where you're considered an expert, quote unquote. It's okay to be like, you know what, I don't have that answer for you, but let me go away and let me track that down, that information, and get you the right answer, instead of just speaking to something that where, you potentially are losing trust with someone by not saying it properly. And then also admitting that you don't know something to your own colleagues is the biggest unlock for sort of like, giving somebody else the ability to be like, well, actually, let me show you this and let me build this out for you. So never be afraid to say you don't know something, even on on a public-ish internal channel like Slack or something like that. If you don't understand it, throw it out there. Somebody else is probably also not understanding it. So that's a big part of it. And then once you're there, once you get there, once you've built the tool, once you've built the demo, or you've tested it out, or you've worked through that problem at work, I want you to think a little bit about, hey, how can I make this useful for other people? How can I document this well so that other people can use it? How can I become that force multiplier for my organization to be like, how can I add value for everybody with this one thing, right? And don't think about it necessarily as your career thing. Think about it as, hey, look at all the people that I'm going to be able to help in my own organization to do the same thing, right? And I had this struggle. Imagine if I didn't have this struggle, how much more I could get done. Now multiply that by 100 or 1,000, and that's how much of an impact you can have.
And over the course of a year, a career, you get multiple of those wins, and you can just really build a consistent, authentic representation of yourself, which I think is just so critical. It's kind of like my experiment. I'm very curious. I think it is the right way to go about life either way, but I also think it's the best way to have success in your career is to be authentic, to be able to know who you are and act within that and have awareness of your perspective and awareness that it's not always right, but the ability to share it whenever you see things that maybe you're seeing some aberrations in the data or some trends that you need to share. And doesn't mean that just because you're sharing it, you're going to be held to it as if it's the absolute truth. Being able to understand that you do have a perspective and it is worth sharing sometimes, especially if you're paid for your perspective, which oftentimes we are. Not for every issue, but we are generally paid to be thinkers in this career. It's
something that I've learned from you, actually, that I'll shout out here specifically, is I think something that you're very good at that I don't think, I think people acknowledge enough, but I feel like could deserve a little bit more highlighting is, the never losing the empathy angle, right? If somebody's coming to you with a certain thing or a problem, having the empathy to understand, okay, that's, they're going through their own struggle, right? Sometimes when their tone or something else is not the way you want it to be, you might want to just think about where they're coming from and their own internal struggles and other things that you may not understand. So I think it's very easy to be dismissive or sort of block out folks or, have trouble working with folks where they can be a bit abrasive. But I think a part of that is very much everybody's got their things that they're doing in a day. And we're just so involved in our own stuff, in our own little bubble, that we don't think about, hey, have a little empathy for the other person. And that little help you give them, maybe it changed their day or their week, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's easier to go through life just in work, but also with dealing with customers if you assume good intent. Ultimately, they're trying to solve some problem. It's a terrible day for them. Their boss sucks. There can be something going on with that. But if you assume good intent, it's a little easier to help them. It feels a little bit better. Maybe they are just a jerk. But what I've found almost every single time, when you actually learn about the factors in someone's life, it kind of makes sense why they're showing up some way. And I've been so fortunate in my career to be able to become friends with you and other people who are a little bit better communicators. And I've been able to see that, basing the way I view myself, basing it on someone's kind of rude comments or something like that isn't very healthy. And because I've been able to see so much good communication from people like you and many others, I've been able to see okay, this is a functional way to handle communication. This isn't. This person isn't even helping themselves by phrasing things in a way that would inspire the person to work. So clearly, something's going on here. But I really do think a lot of it is just I've been able to see what good communication works like, both in friends, but also in working in an org that puts a little bit more emphasis on that kind of thing. It's been pretty transformative for me, at least.
I think you bring your own authenticity to it too. So I think I appreciate the kind words, but for sure, I think you're the master at this, Andrew, and I appreciate you for it. And it deserves to be called out. Your empathy and your level of being able to connect with anybody at any level, is truly exemplary. I've been in the career a long time, decades, and I will say that of many people I've met, you are one of the best at it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. It goes back, I don't talk about this kind of stuff too often on the podcast because it's some heavier stuff, but this kind of thing goes so back early into my life. I've not always been this, hey, I'm Andrew, it's so nice. I have done things that have harmed other people earlier in my life, and I've learned from it. So I've been in those spaces where I've been trying to do good in the world, and I end up being a jerk. Like, I'm really trying my hardest. I didn't quite figure it out. And now to be on the other side of it, where it's like, if people would have known me as a teenager or a young adult, they would not recognize the same person. So I kind of I've seen both sides, and it's so important to me to take that perspective that I have of being that person with me. And it's less prevalent in the IT space, but honestly, it's such a human thing that everyone experiences. We're all, most of us don't leave childhood with all these skills and a great vision of ourselves and how we fit into the world. We have to kind of learn on the job. And that's been incredibly important for me. Like with what I do here, not all I'm trying to do, build PowerShell, all that good stuff. But a large part of what I'm trying to do is support people who are maybe in those same shoes that I was in. Because it's just the right way to go about life. Like, at least it's going to help one person, I think, but it's likely it's going to help others and maybe inspire other people to do similar things in a slightly different way from their perspective, which is valuable. I don't have the ultimate perspective that's going to resonate with everybody. Maybe some people, but certainly not everybody. That's just not how the world typically works.
I think we all have those stories, and it's really like, it takes a strong, confident human to be able to speak to their, shortcomings or failures in the past. I think the only difference between you and other folks who don't say that is probably self-reflection and self-awareness, because we've all done it. It's just being able to look back at it and be like, ooh, I did that, not handle that well. And being able to learn something from that and take from it, and help the next person. That's huge.
Yeah, it's just like work things. Like, are you safe at work to be wrong? Are you safe enough in life to like reflect and be like, oh crap, I screwed up? And it does take safety. And that's something that doesn't just come like, oh, I'm just going to all of a sudden start doing that. You have to kind of build towards it. I've talked about this on the podcast, but I invested some money in myself for therapy for a few years. And to me, to do public stuff, it was absolutely critical. You have to have a very confident vision of yourself and who you are in a relationship with yourself. At least I found that, to do public stuff regularly, because you got to be yourself. And if you don't feel comfortable with other people seeing you for who you are, it's going to be rough. And I don't want to be in those shoes. I've done that a little bit. Like whenever I first got involved in PowerShell, I was feeling like, okay, I need to be an expert and act like I know everything. And then real quick, I realized this is scary. I don't want this burden. And then I kind of came back after a little bit, and with the more authentic voice, at least it felt more authentic.
Oh, no, I think you had it from the beginning. And the fact that you addressed that in that way early on, it was you being conscious and intentional about it. That's huge. I think you bring up a really good point, which I think we probably talked about on the podcast before, but worth mentioning again. There's a concept in, as old school PowerShell folks or sysadmins, it's not thrown around enough. And that's the idea and concept of psychological safety, right, at work. And what you saw is, I think there was a period of time where psychological safety as an employer, folks took real responsibility for it as organizations. There was, a lot of DEI and a lot of inclusion initiatives, and a lot of, HR and people and culture hard at work at that. What I've found over time is, organizations aren't as focused on that anymore. So it almost becomes the individual's burden more than the organization's at this point. So if you're looking to feel your own psychological safety, I can't recommend that enough to seek out therapy or other, cognitive behavioral stuff that'll help you, in sort of helping to feel your own way of psychologically safe, to build it up over time.
And so many of us don't have good emotional support systems. Maybe we have a couple close people, but in this day and age, it's more and more rare for people to have robust friend groups. Really, it's an interesting thing. It's not just in IT, it's kind of all over. I guess there's been some world occurrences 5 years that kind of mix things up, and I don't know. But it's really important to have that, I feel. Some kind of help and support along the way. The more qualified, the better. But, financial situations might determine one thing. But yeah, I found it really, really helpful. And when it comes to psychological safety, dude, I geek out on being the impact that an individual can have. If you're not a manager, if you're not higher leadership, you can have a really positive impact with empowering your coworkers to feel more psychologically safe. And I try and, whenever I think of doing that kind of nice coworker stuff to create a better working environment, I like to, whenever I talk about it publicly, posit it in a way where it's like, it's actually feeding you. It is helping you become more successful. It's helping your work environment be less bad more enjoyable. You have to show up every day anyways, except for a couple sick days. So you might as well make it a really good, functional, fun environment. And if you know a coworker who's working on something that maybe you know, if you can offer them some advice and all of a sudden you're sort of part of their journey and you get to feel happy when they grow a little bit, it's just the right way to be. You can get so much more endorphins released in your brain. Like, let's be selfish here. You can endorphins in the brain. Be nice to teammates. Create happy culture. They'll like you. You'll be friends, sort of. You'll be able to go back and forth and have trust. It's just better for every reason. And I love that about things in life.
That's totally true. And the funny thing is you brought it up in that way, exactly the way that I joke about it. I often joke and say, all of the altruistic nature and all the other stuff and the good things you do for colleagues and others around you and your family, it comes from a place of selfishness, right? At the end of the day, you want to live in a good environment, and you want to work in a good environment. And you know what? You have the control of that. And the more that you put that, positivity, not toxic positivity, but positivity and, empathy and, understanding of your colleagues and your family, the more that you put it out there, the more that you promote that within your team and your family, the huge difference that it has on your mental well-being, right? So it's all selfish in a way, but selfish in the right way.
Yep. And I think that's been sort of the magic that PowerShell and then PowerShell kind of led into DevOps. And I got an insight into all these things that are quite functional in nature and like better for the whole picture and better for the business. And I think initially with the whole DevOps thing, it's like developers and operations were so segmented. It led to huge inefficiencies in the business. All they had was kind of to do is like talk and collaborate on things. And all of a sudden there was cohesion and things weren't stressful and lives were better and you could ship faster. All this huge stuff. And it just comes from this idea of communication, a very human thing that we can all do no matter what your job role is, help desk, sysadmin, engineer on top of the world at Microsoft. Like you have an opportunity to have a positive impact on others and you should take advantage of it. Because that's what, for me, everybody who I see and love in the PowerShell community, they get that paying it forward is the right approach for every reason. It feels good. It can feel scary. For sure, it can feel scary the first times you kind of reach out there. But if you do that enough times, you'll develop confidence and safety. That's psychological safety. You have to take a couple of risks along the way to develop it. So I encourage everybody out there. Adil and I, we're kind of representative of the general vibe of the PowerShell community. We're very open to new folks contributing stuff. So feel free to get out there, do your thing. I always tell people, take your next step, whatever that is. That could be liking a tweet for the first time, creating an account on GitHub, whatever it is. Find your next step. And then the one after that, join us on this vibe of we're doing cool things. We're going places.
Yeah. Even if you want to take one of my projects and drop in an issue or a PR, happy to walk you through it. Happy to work with you on it. I think, Andrew, you and I were very lucky because we got dropped into a community of PowerShell where it was so empathetic and understanding and open and welcoming. And it still is, right? And I think we're very lucky to have that because we've been able to emulate that throughout our careers, right? And continue it. And I think you can't take that for granted. That's been a huge benefit to us. I think that if the fact that it continues to be that way and that we sort of foster that, it's kind of like culture, right? At the end of the day, like DevOps was a culture shift, right? All of these things are culture shifts and culture eats everything else for breakfast.
It does. It sets the standard. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like who you are, what you actually do is what your character is. Like it's the same kind of thing. Like you have to bring that with you and you can benefit from it forever and keep building your brand or however you want to call it. I got to say though, the importance of shepherding those newer folks to the community. I wouldn't be doing anything if it weren't for kind people being willing to respond to my very newbie worded messages. That really inspired a lot of confidence. I have to give a shout out to Josh King. As always, so early on, he would help me out, answer my dumb questions and just say, hey, that looks good. Go for it. Just having that was the difference between me posting a blog and me overthinking it until the end of the world. And I think it's very common. I see people talking to me about blogs a lot. It's very easy to overthink and think you need to have your first blog post perfect. I've told some people to just post it. They end up posting it. Hey, it's off their chest. They can move to the next one. They all of a sudden have a blog with a post and the doors are opened. But it can be hard to do these things. So if you are out there, reach out, allow people to support you, send a DM to somebody. Maybe not everybody will respond, but there's a lot of people in this community who are interested in helping. Join Discord. Find ways to get involved in the community and allow people who are passionate about it. Like I talk to every week, like right now, we are passionate about helping other people. Not everyone has infinite bandwidth, but there are folks who have bandwidth and are looking to share the things that they've developed over a 20-year career with others. Because it takes very little teaching time to reflect what has taken you hours of grinding and like staring at a screen and like, what the heck's going on? So it's a great transaction of energy. Say it like that.
I think that it's true, and I think that a big part of it is like what couldn't be more true about it is if we all did a little bit of it. Even those folks who are maybe further along in our career, if we can pick one person and help them out, right, in a way, be it a colleague, be it somebody on the PowerShell Discord, be it somewhere else. If we all did that, I mean, wouldn't it be awesome? Wouldn't this be a great place to be? Like, I think there's less of that happening now in the world. I think we're so in our bubbles and involved and heads down on work and things like that sometimes you know an answer to a thing, but you don't have time at that moment to do it. Maybe make some time, maybe do make a little extra effort for somebody that costs you maybe a bit of time or energy, and doesn't have any sort of direct financial benefit to you, but that's fine. That's okay. Like, the vibe benefit is infinite right there. So I think that's a big part of it is just you'll feel great. The endorphins get released and you feel good. So, and then you make the community a better place.
Absolutely. Man, we covered a litany of things. We started with AI, Cyberdle, QR Check. We covered a lot of human stuff. I really enjoyed that. We kind of went deep on the tech, deep on the human, and here we are at the end of it. Thank you, Adil, so much for joining me on the PowerShell podcast. And thank you, everybody out there and listen. Don't worry, we'll have a chance to chat after this just a second before I end the recording. But thank you, everybody out there, for listening. Drive safe, walk safe. And if what we talked about, because we kind of open up our hearts. We've been friends for a while, so I think we have some rapport where we can get into this stuff. If you're feeling inspired and maybe you're envious of the journey you hear us speaking and reflecting upon, feel free to reach out. My @ is right there. There's many other people in the community who are also happy to help out. But I think you'd be doing me a disservice if you're hearing this message and it's resonating with you and you don't reach out and say, hey, appreciate it. I look forward to engaging in the community via X, Y, or Z. It's just a challenge. You don't have to take it. I appreciate if you're listening this long to a podcast about PowerShell, you're probably invested in your career and you're on the right trajectory, but you could expedite that trajectory by taking your next step, whatever it is. Only you know what that is. Join us on the PDQ Discord, discord.gg/PDQ. PowerShell Wednesdays, every single Wednesday. I've been treating them more like a live stream rather than a conference talk. Come by, have some fun with us. It's been interesting to kind of focus on the more beginner topics recently and see what's resonating with people. But it's been a lot of fun. I'm going more for an entertainment vibe rather than purely education, just because if people are taking their lunch break, I want them to have some chuckles, have some fun. So join us there. Adil, dude, what an episode, man. I didn't know what we were getting into. I knew it was going to be good. We had some stuff, but what a pleasure, my friend. If people want to connect with you, where can we find you?
Right. So many places. Thank you so much for having me again. I always love our talks. I wish we could do this every week because it really fills my battery too. I think so. The easiest way to get in touch with me is at Adilio, Adilio. I'm that handle on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on GitHub as well, like Adilio.ca, which is my site that I'm revamping that will be fixed by the time this podcast goes up. Of course, reach out to me online on any of the platforms. Blue Sky, I'm at Adilio.ca, and I'm happy to hear from all of you. If there's any message I can put out there, love y'all. Be kind to one another.
Absolutely, it's free to be kind, and it goes such a long way. It is one of those things where if you can find the strength to be kind consistently, it's just going to pay off in spades, and you can rest easy knowing you've done at least one good thing by being kind to others, and maybe not, flicking them off and honking and if there's an issue in traffic. But to me, that's, again, representative of kind of a stressful state. Whenever I'm having reactions like that, your boy is wired hot. Like things are going on, if I'm relaxed and like, oh, it's okay. I'll get the next red light. No worries. Then I'm in a good headspace. So I'm going to strive for that this week. No road rage. It's a good.
Same here. And hey, speaking of striving, I should throw it out there. I was serious about the Cyberdle and the QR Check stuff. If you want to reach out and, PR or issue anything, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to go to the sites and check them out. Like, subscribe, repost, all that stuff, all the things to Andrew's stuff too, because it's really great.
AndrewPlaw.tech/links if you want to find all my stuff. But I will say, just give Cyberdle a try. It's actually really cool looking, and maybe it'll inspire you. It literally is. It looks hackery and greeny and black. It's kind of a cool vibe.
So I took advice from, Theo T3. .gg, the guy out there. He's, some of his takes I don't always agree with, but I have to say one of the big things he said was, if you don't find the thing out there in the community, if you don't find the open source tool that you want, go and build it, right? Go and do the thing. Exactly.
It's an opportunity. That's what it is. So take advantage of opportunities. We've listed a lot of opportunities for folks to take advantage of. Will they? Won't they? The choice is yours, my friend. You are in charge of your own journey and your own destination. And I think the most important thing, though, no matter what, we're all in this journey. We're all working to get paid. Try and find your moments to enjoy it, because you're going to probably be in this job for quite a while. Unless you're already at the top, congrats to you. But if we're going to be here for a while, let's settle in, let's find some friends, and let's enjoy ourselves as we grow. So, Adil, dude, thank you so much. And thank you everybody out there for listening. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast. The PowerShell Podcast is a PDQ production, making device management simple, secure, and pretty damn quick.